no mai piki mai haramai. No reira, kei te timata tātene hui I roti te reo karikia. No reira, kei no I tātou. Pai marire. Tō tia kina māramatanga e te atua. Ki tō mātou ki ingi atu hei tea. Me ngā tinana e mawiwi ana. Tainoa kia tātou I te rānei. Ai. No te Gloria. No te Gloria. No te Gloria. Ride, hau. Pai marire. Nō reira koutou katoa, nau mai piki mai, nau mai hara mai ki tātanei hui tēnei ata. Tuatahi ka huri atu ki tātanei ki ingi atu heitia me tana hoa te ata whai me tā rātou tamariki mokopono hoki. Nō reira, e ngā mana, e ngā reo, e ngā rauranga tiramanga, kua tai mai I tēnei ata. Tēnei te mihi atu kia koutou, nau mai, nau mai, nau mai piki mai, nau mai hara mai. Ka huri atu ki tātanei kia rātou kua whetūrangi te o rātou kua haere ki te pō. Nō reira, te tuatai ka huri atu ki tātanei whaia, tātanei tuahine, Pam Armstrong, te tuahine o Pam. Nō reira, e te tini mate haere atu rā. Ka hoki atu kia rātou I ngā rangatiro o tā mātou whenua o Aotearoa, Wera Gardner, Moana Jackson, whaia June Jackson hoki. Nō reira, kia rātou kua haere ki te pō. Nō reira, moi mai rā. Nō reira, ka huri atu kia mātou I te hongora. Tēnā koutou, nau mai piki mai, nau mai hara mai ki tātanei kōrero I tēnei rā. Nō reira, ko te kaupapa nei, te embracing te tiriti, fostering communities. Nō reira, kei kōnei a mātou. Ngā kai kororo I mua a koutou, hei hāpai, hei tautuku I roti tēnei kaupapa, te whakaro o te tiriti, te whakaro o te honanga, te whakaro o tā mātou hāpuri. Nō reira koutou katoa, tātou katoa I raru I te marua tātanei kaihanga. Tēnei te mihi atu kia koutou, tēnā koutou, a kia ora mai tātou katoa. Ka huri.
Tēnā koe, Tony, and thank you so much for opening our webinar today, and we're really looking forward to hearing from you on our panel a little later on. So, morena koutou, ko Christina Howard aho, and it's an honour for me to be weaving together the kōrero today on this kaupapa, embracing te tiriti, fostering communities. So across Aotearoa, what we're seeing is a growing movement of individuals and organisations who are working and on a journey to understand how to authentically honour te tiriti in their lives and their work. And at Inspiring Communities, we've also been on this journey, and we are so lucky to have and be connected to wonderful pathfinders who are showing us what that looks like in the context of community-led development. So the key thing that we see community-led development sharing with Mātauranga Māori is that place is central. And this shared focus on place means that CLD is an approach that's well suited to supporting this movement to effectively and authentically honour te tiriti. So our kai kōrero today will share what authentic te tiriti relationships are beginning to look like in their places, in Whananaki and Papakura and Hokonui. And they'll also give us some insight into how this looks and how CLD and hapu-led mahi are sometimes woven together and are sometimes sitting alongside each other in place. And we hope that their examples will provide some great insight for your own mahi. So before we get underway, let's meet our panellists. It's great to have you with us today. And you've already met Tony, based in Papakura and the CEO of Papakura Marae. So let's work our way up from the south to the north and have Joe, David and Pam briefly introduce themselves to us. Joe.
Tēnā tātou katoa, ko takatimu tamanga, ko Mataura te awa, ko nai tahu rawa ngati piki au te iwi, ko Boy Skerrit rātou, ko Phyllis McLeod, ko Lewis Gardner, ko Arai te uru woka o Kutupuna, ko Joe toku ingoa. Morena, everyone.
Kia ora, Joe. David. You're on mute.
Tēnā koutou katoa ngā tangata o Aotearoa me te waipānama. E noho ana ki te whanganui tara, ko Rawiri Hana tuku ingoa. Great to be part of this panel today. I'm part of the team of Inspiring Communities that just loves having rich conversations and learning from all the wisdom from all the, and I think it's up to 246 people in this virtual conversation. Kia ora.
Kia ora, David. Pam.
E mihi mahana ki a koutou katoa, e mihi atu ki a koe Tony mō tō whakamoemati ki te atua, mō mātou I tēnei ata, tēnā koe me hoki nā rangatira mā, ko waiahau no Ngāti Wai, no Ngāti Whātua, no Ngāpu I a hau, ko Pam Armstrong tuku ingo. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Kozo. It's great to meet you all. And let's get started. So for those of you out there in Zoom land, don't forget to post your questions in the Q&A as we go. We'll get to them at the end of the presentations. So Pam, you're based in Whananaki, and you said that Whananaki's adoption of CLD approaches, sitting alongside Mātauranga Māori, has helped in an understanding of all the layers in the community and shaping your vision. But it's taken time. Can you tell me about your approach?
Yeah, okay. So, you know, Whananaki is a rural coastal community, about an hour northeast of Whangarei, and it's a small population, but we've got 3 hapu, Ngāti Rehua, Te Whānau Whero and Te Akitai, 1 marae and 1 beach hall, and those are the key gathering spaces for our community. Now, 5 years ago, we entered into a community-led development partnership, and I think back then we didn't realise what a significant move that was, embracing these CLD principles right alongside Mātauranga Māori from the outset, and that's what helped shape our vision right in the beginning 5 years ago. But just to give a little bit of context, for a long time, there's been like an invisible line that nobody ever talks about, which is kind of an us and them. So down in the valley is where all the Māori live, and down on the beach end is where all the non-Māori live. And yes, you pass each other at the shop and at the school and that, but there's never any real connection there, other than that everybody lives in Whananaki and we all love Whananaki. So what's been interesting as we started on this journey, or the CLDP journey, we talked about what would a shared vision look like, you know, shared vision, shared values, and it was quite interesting. Everybody, so we had all of the committees, I suppose, for the whole community represented there at that big hui, and the thing was, you know, everybody quickly identified we're a caring community, and then I don't know how it ended up, but our vision ended up being a culturally connected, caring community. That's something that we all wanted to strive for. Now, let me just say that my mother's 86, born and raised in Whananaki, and she would never describe Whananaki as culturally connected. And I'll give you some examples why, is that the Beach Association, Ratepayers Association, is the main committee for all of Whananaki. Now, in all her years, she has never once attended those meetings, or she has never been invited, but that, you know, you don't have to be invited to go to a meeting. But that's just a little example. Her brother, who's since passed away, was the only one from the valley in many, many years who attended those meetings, and everybody would ask him, hey, what's happening down that end of what's happening down the beach end? And he would report back to the marae in the valley what was going down on the other end. And yet my mother always attended the marae meetings and that. And so there was, and still is to some extent, but it's really improving, an us and them type situation in Whananaki. But so we came up with this shared vision, right? Culturally connected, caring community, and looked at our shared values. Now, the mission that we came up with was Hoia Te Waka. And that was about what people wanted to do is let's, like if we use the waka as a metaphor, let's all get in together and paddle in unison and paddle swiftly, because there's lots to be done. Well, I can say 5 years on, well, it's taken all of 5 years to actually paddle in unison. I think at times, my gosh, our waka has sort of gone up, beached itself every now and again, and then turned around in circles and that. But finally, we're all paddling in unison as we develop our shared understandings and appreciation of each other. And so now I can say we've found our rhythm as a community, a hapu in a community, and we are all paddling in the same direction. Not swiftly, not yet, but we have learned that good things take time, and there have been some shifts. They are subtle shifts to start with, but you know, my mother says that they're seismic shifts as far as she's concerned, because all her life she's never seen such a big change as these last 5 years. And I'll give you examples of what she means by that. Is you know, the marae, many people who have lived their entire lives in Whananaki have never stepped foot in the marae until we brought on board CLDP, and they're like, oh, we can go to the marae. Oh, okay, we can attend a meeting there. And so for the first time, people attended meetings and they're like, oh, I don't know what we were worried about. You know, it's like that. And so that kind of passes on, that ripple effect, that it's good to go up to the marae. And then we had a big cleanup day, the whole community. We do that annually, and we all get in together and clean the roadside and that. And the marae put on the luncheon for all the workers, and people came to the lunch, of course, because they were hungry and it was wet, and we all gathered there, and we took that opportunity to explain about the marae development and what was going on. And you know, the response was overwhelming. People saying, oh, so we can be involved in that, we can help. And so these are some of the things that, you know, why my mother calls it seismic, these shifts that are starting to happen. And then for the first time, like for instance, on Saturday only, we had three big AGMs for the marae. And a non-Māori was elected onto the Women's Committee. It's a big thing for the Valley. And also onto our Māori committee, the environmental one. And some were uncomfortable with it, but she said, I see myself as the bridge. And she got overwhelmingly invited on board. So these are, like, you know, big things happening in our community and that. And soon in October, we'll open the marae, because it's been a huge development, right? And we'll have a big new wharekai. Well, the marae committee have decided that everybody who lives in Whananaki is going to get a personal invitation to join that opening. Now, in all my mother's years, she's never heard about it. So you get to see why I'm saying she thinks it's seismic, these shifts. I think they're small, subtle shifts, but she sees it as seismic in that. And the Beach Association Committee I talked about, who my uncle was the only ever Māori member on that, we now have five from the Valley on that, 5 Māori members from the Valley. And we're doing so many initiatives together. And I think there's this greater appreciation for not only the diversity, but Mātauranga Māori and that, and right alongside CLDP principles. And so an example of that is, like, you know, when we had initiatives that like bring in the expertise from outside and they'll get the job done. Now, one of the shifts is that, okay, we can bring in the expertise if we haven't got it, but remember, we've also got a bit of expertise on hand. And so with our Tai Ao initiative, where we're working on the flora and fauna, we have brought in an expert who is well known for native restoration, but alongside that, we've got some of our kaumātua leading the way. So recognising they bring Mātauranga as well. And with these expert consultants that we bring in externally, it's not just about them doing the mahi, it's about them teaching the locals and leaving that knowledge with them. So, you know, these are some of the shifts that we're starting to see. And I think if you spoke to anybody in Whananaki, they would start to say that we're richer for this. I mean, that's not to say we haven't got a long way to go, but in 5 years, we've seen some big changes. And then just, if I could just briefly say, because I'm sure my time is up, is that we're building a community hub. And there was a lot of discussion. It's taken us 5 years to get to the point where, yes, we're all agreed on the design, where it's going to be, purpose of it. Took 5 years to get to that point. First of all, everybody said, oh, well, it should be here, it should be there, down the beach end. Well, at the end of the day, it came to, well, who's willing to donate the land for it? And that was the marae. The marae were the only ones willing to donate the land for it. So it's now going to be on the marae, and that's quite exciting, you know, but it is for the entire community. And so what we've arrived at is a mana enhancing agreement. What will that look like then, so that it is inclusive of the entire community? It recognises mana whenua, the hapu, you know, and the place of hapu and the marae, as well as how hapuri, how are the community involved in that, so that it truly is a partnership for the generations to come. And so we have what's called a mana enhancing agreement. Okay, it took us 5 years to get to that, but it's a big shift. And so I'd just like to finish on that note, is that you know, there are many lessons to be learnt, but we're much richer for it when we engage in it. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Pam, and thanks so much for that. It sounds like absolutely amazing transformation that's occurring in your community, and you know, the reminder that those things do take time, and I'm sure many conversations and possibly some raru along the way as well. Yeah, maybe we'll have a chance to talk a little bit more about the tools and how you move through that later on. So let's move on to Tony. And I understand at Papakura Marae, you're actually shaping a vision as well, but a vision for 2040, which is going to be 200 years after Te Tiriti was signed. So can you tell us how that's informing your mahi?
Oh, look, kia ora everyone, and thank you, Pam. Thank you for that walk down memory lane for me, a little bit around Whananaki. So, you know, that's just over the hill from one of my hometowns, Ngāti Hau, but ngā mihi atu kia koe. So 2040, there's a lot of people that are around that have that vision of 2040. Our babies that are born this year will turn 18 in the year 2040. So they're old enough to go to war, old enough to vote, old enough to drive a vehicle, old enough to do a lot of things. So the 2040 vision, Te Tiriti 2040, is all about what we do today that'll have the change. And a lot of people aren't really planning for 2040, but significant to Māori, 200 years since the signing of the Tiriti. So when I say Vision 2040, for me, it's all about that thing called Oranga Tamariki, is that place that we used to talk about in the 2020s. That place called prisons is a place that we used to talk about in the 2020s. So the changes that we make today will influence what the 2040 vision will look like. But kia ora everyone. So I'm the CEO at Papakura Marae. We're an urban marae, and I say that deliberately because it's quite different to mana whenua marae. So we're here in Ngāti Tamaoho area, which is one of our local hapu, our iwi here in Papakura. As the CEO, I place a lot of importance on partnering through authentic relationships. Partnering through authentic relationships. So by that I mean that I like to be. I hate when people call me a partner or call us a provider. I prefer that they call us a partner, because when you partner, you share the responsibility, you share the risk, you share all the, I guess, all the ups and all the downs, but more importantly, you share the glory, you share the outcomes. So it's a slow thing with government departments because they're so used to, I guess, being in control. They hold the purse for 95% of the spend. So we're just trying to subtly change that through authentic relationships. Just leave it there, Sarah. All good, I'm on a Zoom. Thank you. So for me, it's partnering through authentic relationships and feeling like a partner with government, feeling like a partner with philanthropy, feeling like a partner with iwi, feeling like a partner with our who, to me, the main relationship should be, and that's with our whānau that we serve, and that's whānau non-Māori and Māori. You know, one of the key things that Papakura Marae is we've got the name of our wharenui is Tingira, kotahi te koha o Tingira I kuhuna ai te miro māpango whiro. So through the other needle, the red, the black and the white strands must pass. So we interpret that at the marae as, I don't care whether you're red, black or white, you're welcome at our marae. 50 odd thousand people live in Papakura. The majority of them have never been to the marae. So, you know, we extend that invitation, like Pam was saying with Whananaki, it's people haven't really been down to that level, I suppose. So that invitation is always there. But to me, authentic relationships is about feeling like a partner as opposed to a provider. You know, that whole master-servant relationship, subservient relationship is gone. Folks, that is gone, and we shouldn't be thinking that way at all. So, you know, there's that old saying that many of you have probably heard, there are two ships that survive in a storm. Two ships that survive in a storm, partnerships and relationships. So as the CEO of this organization, I place a lot of focus, a lot of emphasis on that, which has brought us to today we have over 48 different services from the marae. You know, some of the government funders that fund us don't even know what the left hand and the right hand are doing in terms of funding us. So we're in a really awesome place at the moment of where we're going to collapse all those contracts together. But the most important clause I'm wanting to push with government is the clause, do what it takes clause. We found that over the last 18 months with the pandemic that when they allowed us to just do what it takes and shift at the rate that the government was shifting with announcements from the Prime Minister and all that, you can't afford to wait for a contract to change, or can't afford for someone to go take it back. So we need to start thinking and having that trust, that partner, not as a provider, as a partner, that we know what we're doing and that we've been here for 40 plus years. The training wheels are off. So really, you know, and it's about forming those relationships where there's trust. We feel like a partner, and that we do have that understanding that we will do what it takes. There's a lot of the contracts we have they don't realise that we give out kai. They don't realise we put clothing on the back of whānau and so on. So because they don't fund that kind of stuff. So really, so that was the first point I wanted to quickly make. The second point, the second point. The first one was 200 years since the signing of the treaty. We need to make, you know, I can't wait another 18 years. I'm too impatient. I want the change now. But with that vision in mind, what does Tāmaki Makaurau, what does Aotearoa look like in the year 2040? We need to start making those shifts today. The last point that I want to make is, you know, I'd love to, and I think there's been noise about this more recently, I'd love to see the real New Zealand story being taught in our schools. That story coming from Māori, that story coming from new settlers, that story, you know, and we come to an understanding. And it's okay to have 10 versions of the truth, because everyone's history is different, everyone's perspectives are different, but we're creating more of that. You know, I'm sick of seeing those books that say Captain James Cook discovered New Zealand and all that kind of stuff. Well, mate, there was a few people here a few hundred years before we arrived. So it's all that kind of stuff, getting the real New Zealand story out there and learning. And from that understanding, we can form better fostering better communities and having better relationships across the board. So again, my 3 points: partnering with authentic relationships, having that vision 2040 in mind, and what we do today will impact on that. Our kids that are born today, our babies born today will turn 18. They'll be adults in the year 2040. So how do we shape that? And really pushing the real New Zealand history, the real New Zealand story. So in conclusion, what authentic relationships and Te Tiriti, embracing Te Tiriti is all about from an urban Māori perspective is bringing the decision-making as close to whānau as possible. A lot of people, government departments talk about being whānau-centric, whānau-driven, whānau-led. I challenged them to, but are they really bringing the decision-making as close to whānau or allowing whānau to make those decisions? Nō reira, kia koutou katoa. Kia ora mai tātou. Kauri.
Ngā mihi, Tony. Thanks so much for that very concise pulling together of your points, and really interested perhaps to talk a little bit later about what partnering through authentic relationships looks like in a practical sense. I think there's some really good tips that you can give us on that too. So let's move on. I would love to hear a little bit now from Joe. Joe, you are the consummate weaver and believing that everyone has strengths to bring to the table. So what does that look like on the ground in Hokonui for you now?
Morena, ka mihi, Christina. Geez, I hope I'm weaving it strong enough so it actually is sustainable and lasts for a long time. Look, here at Hokonui, as mana whenua, we have quite a large rohi, and we have a lot of shared rohi with our other Rūnanga. Hokonui is one of the 18 papatipu Rūnanga for Kaitahu. And we are on a pretty happy week at the moment with Tatipane O'Regan, New Zealander of the Year, which is a beautiful segue into what we're discussing today. And just to quote him, Te Tiriti is for all people of New Zealand. You are here by the right of indigeneity or of the right of the treaty. And I think that really drives home why it's important for all of us to understand there's a role to utilise, and whatever the motivator is for you to make sure that that can be more effective in this partnership, then let's do it and get there together. We talk a lot at Hokonui about if you live, work and play in a space, and this is probably all the 7 Southern talk in this manner. What have we given culturally, socially, environmentally and economically? And how and what is that measured? And understanding that everybody within the community has different levels of what success may look like. So we have to keep evolving towards that mutual understanding of each other to find those common markers that we can all come together to push against the cart as such. I've got 3 main points that we focus on within in Hokonui, and we have some great documents and guidelines on our website to help people with the relationship as well that summarise a lot of these things. But the first one is genuine collaboration. And what does that look like practically? That's equal and authentic, and probably one of the more important pieces in here, it's early and ongoing engagement. And when I say early, it's like you've had the idea early. Don't come after the plan's written to have a convo with mana whenua. Even if you're just thinking about the topic, have a cup of tea, such kōrero, about, hey, we're thinking this, what do you think? And you know what? That just weaves into any community. Nothing about us without us. And that's everybody living within the community. My next point would be resourcing, consideration to capacity, skill and planning, and basically that comes down to costs. Hokonui Rūnanga and some of our current core projects that we're working on for our bosses, and that's our whānau, is we've got Mitahuka Region, which has 6 work streams. That includes an Underia with the pharmaceutical extract, pet food. We've got the hydrogen initiatives. We have the Tiwai site regeneration. And we have a leadership incubation process on the go at the moment as well for our succession planning. We have Kaitahu Ki Te Whenua, which is the 7 Rūnanga organising ourselves for that engagement in the Central and Queenstown Lakes area. We have the Hokonui Hills Biodiversity. We have the Catlins Biodiversity Project. We have the Kaitiaki program. We have our own forestry Te Tapu o Tāne, where the 4 Rūnangas are sharing together. Now, the reason I'm saying all these projects is we have a core amount of work. So when it looks like we're hard to get a hold of or we're not responding quickly, I just want everyone to know we are doing some other things as well. And you've got to be mindful of that timing and the costs and the implications required when we need to partner on something. Hence, I'll go back to my early engagement so we can actually put it into the diary as well. And my third point would be cultural competency. To have a basic competency and to be comfortable engaging within our space and our Hui protocol, we do expect you to do a bit of Googling first. So don't come cold. In regards to that, an easy, practical is just look for a website or even a Facebook page and see what you can find out before you enter. I use an analogy. It's like you're on your street, the whole neighborhood's got a great system of looking after each other, and someone new moves in. If you were to knock on their door, walk over and say, hey, I've come to clear out your fridge of all the food, welcome to the street. That would be very confusing for somebody when you're trying to build a relationship with them, to welcome them into your community, to work out the kaupapa and the guidelines and the rules of engagement for that street and how they look after each other. But if there's no context and you're just asking and taking, it's not a relationship, it's unequal. And you also want to know what's happening for that person. So getting to know them the best way you can. And I just want to make note, Pam, your mother's right. Those are huge, those are seismic, huge shifts. Your mum is right. That is major. And I thought you raised a really good point. There's a lot of talk about co-governance in New Zealand at the moment. The co-governance doesn't go one way. A non-Māori elected onto the AGM, one of the committees, that's a huge deal. And people forget this goes both ways. And also working in the 2040, Tony, bang on. In 2045, the prediction is Southland will be 25% Māori population. That's a big deal for our planning. And it's also another good point. As mana whenua, we're planning in 200-year blocks. We're planning for the future for those that aren't even born yet. So do keep that in mind when you're discussing. We're not talking in election cycles at any time, and we will always be here. So yeah, that's pretty much us. And I just want to say again, nothing about us without us. And that's every community, everybody in that community. Ka mihi.
Ngā mihi, Jo. Thanks so much. It's really great to be reminded of those very basic relationship fundamentals that we need to think about in any process where we're wanting to engage with people across communities, with mana whenua and with other communities as well. So just a reminder to people out there, please pop some questions in the Q&A. I know you'll have some, there's some really deep gold in some of these conversations that we can dig into. We need your questions to help do that. But let's move on to David. So David, you recently wrote an article on how the values and tools of CLD can help communities foster the connections and the inclusive and restorative relationships that will really help us honour Te Tiriti. So what are some of the key messages from that you'd like to draw out today?
Tēnā koutou anō. Yeah, rich conversations in that have already surfaced and insights. And I just offer my whakaaro from a tangata Tiriti perspective. So someone on a learning journey about how to sort of claim my connection to this place through Te Tiriti, you know, and that's a really rich learning journey. And just some reflections that were in the article, but I think have been highlighted in the korero this morning. Seismic has already been used, and that was the opening thing in the paragraph of the article. And I think I just want to note for tangata Tiriti that there's some real opportunity and shifts happening, but we can't take them for granted. Like there's got to be need to be real proactivity, because we know that racism and colonialism is really embedded in systems and mindsets. So we've really got to be consistently open, pursuing in that, rather than just thinking, oh, it's all happening, it's all sweet. You know, I just think, we can't take that for granted. What I think is already being demonstrated is that the power of local place to give effect and have conversations about what authentic partnerships are. And I think that complements a national conversation about Tiriti. It's really important that leaders at a national level have debate and discussion, because at that national level that needs to happen. But if it doesn't happen in local place, it's a really it's unbalanced, and there's risks with that. So I think in local place, engaging in, whether it's the conversation about Tiriti or whether it's about just understanding what partnership looks like with mana whenua or local marae, be they urban marae or mana whenua marae, that is absolutely critical. And, you know, I just reflect that Te Tiriti was not just signed at Waitangi. It was signed at many places all over Aotearoa. And in every place, there was probably a different korero and a different discussion and different realities and histories and stories that embellished that understanding. So when we move to more authentically honour Tiriti, we need to understand the richness of those diverse stories that happen in place. And I really think that will embellish this momentum, because we say in Inspiring Communities, we learn by doing. And you know, you have a commitment, you have your values, you have your direction, and you get and do stuff, and that surfaces issues, opportunities. You know, as Pam said, sometimes the waka got grounded a bit, and it needed some more discussion and reflection to keep it moving again. And that's building the resilience in communities, because there's no doubt about it that communities are going to need a lot of resilience with what we know is coming down the pipeline towards the planet and Aotearoa me te Waipunamu. And I say in the article that resiliency is the connection of, it's the linking between connectedness and diversity. So this slide here that's up, that we've sort of arose out of all the experience of Inspiring Communities, te whanaki a hapori, te whakawhanaki a hapori. Hopefully you see from that illustration, on the basis you have the whenua, that's the grounding. Then over that you have the tangata whenua and the various hapu and iwi that thread through that. And then crossing through that is the various sectors, groups, different parts that make up and have a relationship with place. So that when we think about community-led development, Mātauranga Māori, we need to understand the totality of that picture. So I guess just to end, because that's my 4 minutes, I think it's really important that we have respectful conversations in local place that help all people with an interest in that place to interact with the history and to make meaning and to help formulate a vision for that place. And, you know, as Tony's mentioned, we have the potential with the new history curriculum. Potentially what that will trigger is the schooling and education system will learn about its local history and host rich conversations about that place that enrich, and by doing so, give effect to and honour that vision that was encapsulated in Tiriti. So, nō reira, ka mutu toko kororo I tēnei rā.
Kia ora, David. Thanks so much for that, and thanks to all of our panellists for sharing your stories and your whakaaro. And just another reminder to pop your questions in the Q&A so that we can get to them. But let's lead off just with a little bit of a conversation between our panellists. And so I'm interested in the link between CLD and hapu-led, iwi-led work, and that is different in different places and might look different depending on what community you're in. Pam, I'd just like to explore that with you a wee bit, because, you know, you talked about how starting out in a community development program initiated those conversations and things happening. What were some of the things that people can do from CLD or from starting out to actually initiate those conversations?
Yeah, well, first of all, can I just say there is a difference between hapu-led development and community-led development. However, in the case of Whananaki, by introducing the CLD principles, what was recognised from the outset is the value of Mātauranga Māori in that, and that, you know, everybody's got a contribution to make, and those principles sat well in terms of an Indigenous lens on things. But the one that's been outstanding for us is learning as you go. So you don't know all the answers and that, but as you go on the journey together, you start to learn more about each other and what those principles look like when you apply them to your community. Water has been a classic example of that. When we put that up on our vision, clean water, you know, people said, oh, well, why don't the marae just get some more water tanks? It wasn't as simple as that, you know, but it provided an opportunity to talk about the Māori of why. So why was water so important, you know, to the hapu as well as the community? So through that, learning as we go, you know, learning and doing together, we've started to be able to recognise, yeah, the hapu has a perspective on this and it should be valued, so too do others, but it's when you get the discussion going, you start to have greater appreciation.
Awesome. Thanks, Pam. I think that's really helpful. Remembering we can always move into a new space with a learning mindset can really make things flow a lot more easily. And we've got, speaking of flowing, we've got lots of questions flowing in now, so I think we might just move to one of those. And this one, Tony, is a question, I think, well, something that you noted. Others might have perspectives on it as well, but you noted that government is used to being in control, and the person who's asking the question is saying that they're also finding that this tendency and the risk aversion just slows things down and brings quite a distracting energy. Have you, Tony, got any tips, or any of the panelists got any tips for acknowledging those government issues but not letting it slow us down?
Look, not really. It's a slow process with some organisations, some government departments. So really, I like to tackle it from finding someone with maybe at a site level, at a manager at a site level, and getting that leadership at a ground level understanding, but also addressing it from, I guess, a ministerial level and Wellington quite often level as well. So just attacking it from both sides, but it's not about attack. It's probably the wrong word. It's probably getting to where that relationship is authentic and trusting and that understanding, and that takes time. You know, you don't run into a relationship and just fall in love overnight, or not within these situations. You know, so it takes time, it takes hard work, but worth the fight. And I'd start off with three things, and that's the value base. It's about being tika, about being pono, and having aroha for our whānau, our communities. And, you know, if you tika meaning doing the right thing, for the right reasons, pono being honest and truthful, not having any hidden agendas or this is a politically driven thing, and having unconditional love and compassion for our communities. It's always a good starting point in terms of building those authentic relationships. And I haven't found a government department that doesn't want that.
Yeah, can I just add to that briefly? Totally agree with what Tony's saying about having those guiding principles. But I wanted to, well, this is a shout out for DIA actually, because I'm used to working with government departments, and, you know, they say, oh yeah, well, this is a co-design thing, but this is what we'd like to see, you know, kind of thing. It's already predetermined what it's going to be. But we had this experience like with the DIA, and we says, oh, so are we allowed to do this? Would we be able to, you know, this is kind of what we're wanting, would we be able to do that? And it was so refreshing to come back and say, well, really, it's community led. That's up to you to tell us. And I said, seriously, for real? And, you know, the CLD advisor says, of course, that's what community-led development is all about. So it's been really refreshing to work with a government department who seriously means a community-led development. Thank you.
If I could just add on to what Pam's just said, I don't know how many government departments that we're involved in. None of them have ever asked me for my strategic plan. It's always about their strategic plan, their vision, and so on. You know, just take 5 minutes and ask for our strategic plan. You know, we might surprise you. Kia ora.
Just on to support that, kōrero, you might actually find it on our website.
Thanks, Joe.
I think this opens up a really interesting discussion because in some ways, the further you get away from Wellington, potentially the more flexibility and room you get to move. Because I touch on my article, is part of this is about the design of the system of our public sector. And it's informed by some thinking of the 1980s and new public management, which in the Public Finance Act and various things like that, that to some extent, that's a container, which all government officials to some extent need to constrains how they operate. You know, we all need boundaries. And I think we need to have an understanding, is this how much room government departments have to move in? And I have the privilege where I'm in the community, I've got a lot more room to move. So to some extent, if I was sitting in government, I would look for that. It's hard to innovate in government, but there's lots of innovation happening in hapu, iwi, and community network space. So it's sort of like the danger is try to colonize too quickly that innovation and smother it. So I just think it's a really rich conversation and really important for Karo in terms of our journey.
Kia ora. Thanks everyone for their comments. Oh, sorry, Joe. We've got so many.
There's a shift in the air as well. There's a lot of ministries that are willing to sit down and talk about some of these contract outcomes and talk about, well, what's this wall actually holding up? What are you trying to make sure doesn't happen? And can we do it in a better way so that we're not all getting frustrated and spending 20% of the time of the project with the reporting? So there's been some really open conversations, and we've actually modified some pretty major funding lines recently on those outcomes, for particularly that reason, because too much time was being spent measuring weekly what didn't actually need to be measured from an external or internal point of view, to the actual mahi being completed for the outcomes of employment and engagement and improved environment. So it was just weighing up, hey, we've got a different weight here. But the time is now. People are open for these conversations as long as we're mutually understanding why certain PO are in place and what they're actually holding up, or are they decorative? I think we are moving into that space.
It's great to hear that that's your experience, Joe. That's fantastic. So we've got lots of questions coming in now, so I'm just going to move on to the next one. And actually, there's a number of questions on this particular theme. So it's a question for everyone. As a community organisation, we've been talking a lot about government, but as a community organisation with increasing call to incorporate Te Ao Māori and Te Tiriti into our organisation's strategy and foundation and vision, how could we do this authentically and appropriately? Any thoughts?
I think Jo's already given a clear signal from her experience about do your homework. There's a lot of information available, whether it's the Waitangi Tribunal is a rich resource of reports and insight, but also various iwi and hapu have their own plans and documentations and visions about where they want to go. Understand what they are. And then, I'd be saying, well, how does that, in terms of the diagram, where does that transect with our vision? Oh, we can offer each other. That's what we want. How can we support them? Which is different from just like Joe saying, knocking at the door saying, oh, welcome to the neighbourhood. Oh, can I have some food out of your fridge? It's a bit,
Can I add to what David's saying is I think David's absolutely right. It's always good to do a little bit of homework first of all, but I want to go back to what Tony said about also doing some homework around what do those three principles look like tika, pono and aroha. Just think about that and how that actually applies to your own respective organisation or group. How do you apply those principles first and foremost? Because if you're going to go into a partnership, those are going to be really fundamental, is about how those carry through and permeate the relationship and that. So I think that's a good starting point too, to have a think about what that means. I was just on talking to some university students yesterday, and I says, think about aroha, because that's a superpower. You got that down pat, and what if you do, your actions, if you bring the spirit of aroha to that, that's a superpower to have. So that's just my little contribution to, hopefully that might help.
I love that, Pam, and I think everyone's talked about, get your own house in order, make sure that you know where you're standing and coming into the relationship on a foundation of aroha. Pam, this is kind of another question on the version on the same theme, and talking about those bridging conversations. How did they start? What advice do you have for any beginners on the CLDP journey about starting those conversations?
Yeah, well, here's the thing. What I've learned is that it's different for everyone. Like, I suppose I've had the best of both worlds, being sent away to study at university and all those things, but being brought up as a marae kid, you know, brought up on the marae and that. So I didn't think it was a scary thing to just rock up to the marae when something's going on. But I've had people tell me that's the scariest thing. You know, like we're very good friends. She's on the CLD leadership group, and she says to me, you know, Pam, coming along to that CLD meeting at the marae, I was so terrified. She thought, oh, what if I have to sing a waiata? She says, I'm going to die, you know. And she says, but what, just helping me prepare to say, you know, someone saying, just come along, you're going to be fine. You don't have to sing a waiata. You just need to sit there and listen, and that, you know. So it's, I think it's different for everyone, and that, yeah. But that's what I kind of learned, is that it actually can be quite a scary thing. And you know, I took along to the, like, it goes both ways, because for the Ratepayers Association meeting, which has been going on for the last 50 years plus, I took somebody along to that, and like, they stuttered when they went to speak. They're not a stutterer. And I said to them, I whispered, what was that all about? And they go, well, you don't know how nerve-wracking that is, Pam, to sit in this meeting and have to say something with all eyes on you. And, you know, so I started to understand that it can be quite a scary thing, but, you know, what's that thing? Feel the fear and do it anyway. And it's not as bad as what you thought it was. But I take the point of what others have said, David and co, is like, do your homework, find out a little bit more about that before just diving in.
Mihi, thanks. That's really great advice, Pam. So going back to the pressures that we've noted that everyone's under, here's a question from an NGO that's working in a project-based and a mix of commercial and grant funding. And in both instances, they often find that that funding structure and the time and delivery pressure don't actually allow enough time for genuine considerations and engagement around with Te Tiriti and with the people of their place. So does anyone on the panel, and maybe Tony, you could talk about that, do you have any tips for how to navigate that, especially with funders, when there's no consideration for the time that's needed to be taken?
Yeah, understanding government rhythms, is it's you got to understand why they've put those kind of timeframes in place and work from that context, I believe. And usually it's because the envelope comes out in about November, and then they've got to put it into the budget and so on. So it's a whole kind of almost a year in advance in terms of the government cycles of things. But when you've been around long enough, like I have, you start to get used to that. And you can have an attitude of work with that, or you can have an attitude of disrupting. And lately I've been in the disrupting space. And so, you know, your poor planning ain't my emergency. Put it that way. Your poor planning ain't my emergency. So it's a negotiation. And as a CEO of an organization, mate, you know, you just got to go there and have those disruptive, courageous conversations and just lay it out. And more importantly, articulate your reasons why it's important to take the time and get it right. But yeah, far too often it's because they've got strings that they're pulling, that they have to pull, and they've got accountability and so on. So I always try and, you know, a good part of leadership is seek to understand. But if we could agree to begin with the end in mind, then it's a lot easier when we both agree on what that ending looks like, and then work backwards from there, time frames included. Kia ora.
I just offer whakaaro too, because with my Wesley Community Action portal on, that tension between, and almost like a contradiction of working in a way that's community-led, and the time and energy and that of a community which has its own rhythm, to a contractual stuff. It feels like two different worldviews. And you know, how we have to work with both and hold those contradictions. And I think as we move into these competencies we need to develop in holding diversity and complexity, they're not either or. You know, I sometimes in my frustration and just want to just tell them to get lost, you know, but they've got their own accountabilities and systems I need to understand, as Tony's outlining. So it's actually just how we hold contradictions and sort of weave a path through that is respectful and assertive.
Can I just also remind you that no government department knocks on the door and says, here's $1 million project, go ahead, without you having an idea prior. And that's what I meant by early engagement. If it even crosses your organisation's mind, well, let's go have a cup of tea and have a wee chat and see what the other people think about this. You can have, and if you've got a maintained, authentic relationship, it won't be, oh my gosh, we need to have a meeting. Who do we meet with? Because you already know. So when it comes to that point, you'll be able to shorten your own timeline that way, but authentic early engagement prior to the contract turning up.
I totally agree with what Joe is saying around that, the whole thing around engagement and whanaungatanga, because with a relationship, there shouldn't be any surprises. So a recent one, you know, I let the funder know, look, we are lagging a little bit behind this, but I want you to understand our lead for the taiao, he passed away. And then our coordinator had a massive heart attack. You know, so I started to, through the relationship, try and get them to understand it's not because we're not doing what we want to do, but things happen. You know, life happens, and we're going to do our best, but we'll get there. And if you could just help us with this. And, you know, the response was wonderful. It was such a warm response, and that was from Doc, who can be quite difficult to work with at times. But that's that whole thing about don't give each other surprises.
Now, mihi kia koutou to all of our panellists. Thanks for that wonderful kōrero, and it's actually a great thing to close our conversation on, which is if you've already started, if you're already engaged in a relationship, it's not about the project, it's about just a continuation of the conversation that you've been having. So I'm sorry we haven't had time to get to all of the questions. We have captured all of them, and we're going to work out what we can do with them. And just want to let you know that we've had an amazing response to this webinar, and so we've put together a few links for other resources you might want to follow up on that slide there. So don't worry, we'll be sending that out to you. It includes some tools from Te Rūnanga and another excellent presentation from Pam that she did late last year. So we'll be sending that out to you. There's also a lot more happening at Inspiring Communities. Here's some of what we have coming up. We've got our next community building block coming up, which could be very relevant. Sissy Rock guiding us through some strategies for dealing with difficult conversations in a sensitive, generous and relationship building way. And our Child Rich Communities initiative is ramping up again, connecting people working in community-led ways to support tamariki whānau and communities across the motu. And we've got our next webinar in preparation. It's going to be called Locally Led Matters, and focusing on how we can harness the power of collaborative local leadership as the current local government reforms give us the opportunity to think beyond our present structures. So that's going to be in late June. Keep an eye out for that. The easiest way to stay informed is to sign up to our newsletter on our website, and there's a link in the pack to that, the slide pack. So I think we're just going to finish up there. It's 11 o'clock, and I'll hand back to Tony to close for us today.
Ka pai, kia ora, Christina. Nō reira, mai ki te mutunga o tātanei hui. As we come to the end of our hui, I just want to acknowledge everyone on behalf of the panellists, on behalf of Christina, on behalf of everyone that's joined us today. Nō reira, ngā mihi atu kia koutou, kia pai tōra, nō reira kia inoi tātou. Kia tau, kia tātou katoa. Te ata whai o tō tātou arikia ihu karaiti, me te aroha o te atua, me te whiwhinga tahitanga ki te wairua tapu. Ake, kia pai tōra. Āmene.
Āmene.
Āmene, kia pai tōra.